There's probably something you want to make that you haven't made yet because you already know it's not going to be very good. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you've wanted to start making videos or learn how to paint or do photography or whatever, and every time you think about actually doing it, you start thinking about everything that's wrong with the idea. The camera isn't good enough, you're not good enough, you don't know enough yet. You need to figure out your style first, or you need to get better before anyone sees it. And honestly, some of those things might even be true. Your first version of whatever it is you make probably won't be very good. That's kind of the problem, because I think a lot of us would rather keep the thing in our head than make the real version and find out. And that's pretty strange when you think about it. You get to keep believing that you might be really good at something as long as you never actually do it, because the second you do it, you have to find out. Is it good? Is it bad? It might be much worse than you thought, or maybe it's actually pretty good and you've been wasting 6 months worrying about it. You don't know. And I think that's why I'm waiting until I'm ready can sometimes be a very convincing way of telling ourselves, I don't want to find out yet. Because once you make something, your potential becomes a real thing. And real things can be judged. They can fail and they can embarrass you. They can also get better. So I want to talk about why making something bad might actually be one of the most important parts of making anything at all. Not because failure is secretly amazing. It's not. Sometimes bad work is just bad. It's because you can't skip the part where you're bad at something. And if you keep trying to skip it, you might spend years trying to protect the idea that you could be good at something without ever giving yourself the chance to actually really become good. That's the part that I'm interested in, because maybe the thing standing between you and the work isn't a lack of talent. Maybe it's the fact that you're still trying to protect your potential. I think sometimes we're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of making something that's obviously bad because failing sounds like something that happened to you. Making something bad is a little more personal. You made that, and now it's sitting there. Evidence. And I think that's why a lot of people get stuck before they really start. They have pretty good taste. They know what good work looks like. They've watched great movies, listened to great music, they've read great books, seen great photographs, whatever. So they have this picture in their head of what the thing is supposed to look like, and then they try to make it, and the gap is enormous. That's actually a really normal problem. You just don't usually hear people talk about it in that way. There's this idea in creative work that you should somehow be able to make the thing that you can imagine, but those are completely different abilities. You can have excellent taste and almost no ability to execute it. And honestly, that's probably the situation most beginners are in. You know what a good movie looks like, but that doesn't mean you know how to direct one. You know what a good photograph looks like, that doesn't mean you know how to take one. And that's a frustrating position to be in because your taste is ahead of your ability. You can see the problem, you just can't fix it yet. It's like having a very good interior designer that lives in your head while your actual apartment looks like a college dorm. The person in your head has standards. Your hands don't. And I think this is where people sometimes misunderstand perfectionism, because perfectionism sounds like such a positive thing. I just have really high standards, and sometimes that's true. Sometimes you genuinely care about quality. But sometimes I wonder if I have high standards is just a nicer way of saying I don't want to be bad at this, because if you never release the song, you never have to hear anyone say it's bad. If you never publish the video, nobody can dislike it. If you never show anyone the painting, you can keep imagining that maybe you're actually very good at painting. And that's a surprisingly comfortable place to live. You can have all the identity without any of the evidence. You can think of yourself as a writer without having written a terrible story. You can think of yourself as a filmmaker without having made an awkward little film. And your potential stays completely intact. That's the nice thing about potential. It can't disappoint you. You could be brilliant. You just haven't done it yet. And I think sometimes we protect that possibility without realizing that we're protecting it. Because once you actually make something, you find out maybe you're good, maybe you're not. Maybe you're good at one part and terrible at another. Maybe you thought you wanted to do it, then you realized it sucks and you hate it. Maybe you make something and it's much better than you expected. You don't know. And that's the whole point. You need evidence. I think that's one of the most useful things about actually making stuff. It gives you information that thinking doesn't. You can spend 6 months thinking about whether you want to start a YouTube channel and think about your niche and the camera and your name. You can do research for microphones and all of that. After all that research, you still haven't made a video. So you actually know less than you think because you haven't found out whether you enjoy writing scripts. You haven't found out whether you hate editing or if you like talking to the camera. You You haven't found out whether anyone cares. And I'm not saying anyone needs to care. That's not the point. The point is that reality gives you feedback. You make something, you look at it and go, okay, that's not what I was going for. Good. Now you have something to work with. Maybe the first video is terrible, but now you know why. Maybe the pacing is bad. Maybe you hate being on camera. You have to make the bad version first. And I think there's something important about that phrase, bad version, because we often treat the first version as if it's supposed to be the final version. It's not. It's the first version. That's why it's first. This seems obvious, but somehow it's easy to forget. If you've never painted before, your first painting is probably going to look bad. If you've never made a video before, the first video might be a little rough. That's not some shocking revelation about your talent. It's just what happens when a person does something for the first time. But we have a strange relationship with being a beginner. We don't mind being a beginner at something when nobody can see. You can learn to cook and burn dinner, whatever. You can go to the gym and use the machine wrong, fine. You can learn a language and pronounce something horribly, that's part of it. But when it comes to creative things, it suddenly feels connected to who we are. If I make a bad painting, maybe I'm not an artist. If I write a bad song, maybe I'm not a musician. That's a weird conclusion. You don't say somebody isn't a runner because their first mile was slow. You don't say somebody isn't a guitarist because they can't play very well after 3 weeks. The difference is that creative work feels like saying something about you. You're not just doing the thing, you're putting a little piece of your taste, your judgment, your personality into it. So when somebody doesn't like it, or when you don't like it, it can feel strangely personal. And I think that's why making something bad can actually be an important experience. It teaches you that the thing you made and the person who made it are not the same thing. You can make something terrible and still make another thing tomorrow. You can look at your work and say, yeah, this isn't very good, and then go make it better. It's allowed. You don't have to defend everything you've made just because you made it. Actually, I think it's pretty healthy to just be able to look at something you made and say, yeah, that's shit. I don't like it. Because now you're free to change it. You don't have to protect it. And eventually, if you keep doing that, something weird happens. The bad work becomes less threatening. You make something, it's not great, you survive. Then you make another thing and it's a little better. And then one day you look back at the first thing and it's almost funny, not because it was secretly good, it wasn't. It's funny because you're so worried about it. You spent all that time trying to not make something bad, and eventually you realize that making something bad was just part of it. And this is where I think the whole thing gets a little bigger. Because maybe the real fear isn't actually failure. Maybe it's finding out whether you can do the thing, finding out whether you're any good, finding out whether the idea you have is secretly interesting or if it's crap, finding out whether people care. As long as you don't make anything, you don't have to know. You can keep the fantasy alive, and there's nothing wrong with having fantasies about your life. It's fun. It's nice to imagine some future version of yourself who's figured it all out. The problem is when the imagined version becomes so much easier to live with than the real version that you stopped giving the real version a chance. Because the imaginary filmmaker never makes a bad movie, and the imaginary writer never writes a boring chapter. The imaginary version of you is basically undefeated, but when you're not doing anything, at some point I think it's worth trading a little bit of the perfect imaginary potential for something real. Even if it's worse, especially if it's worse, because you can work with something real. You can't work with potential. You can't edit a song you haven't recorded. You can't improve a painting you haven't painted. You can't rewrite a story that only exists in your head. You need the ugly version. You need the awkward version. You need the version where you look at it afterwards and think, okay, I have some work to do. That's actually a pretty good place to be because now you're in the game. And maybe that's all making something really is for a while. Not proving that you're talented, not proving that you have an idea that's grand or everything it takes to be the best, just getting yourself into a position where you can really finally teach you something. So if there's something you've been wanting to make, I don't think you need to convince yourself that it's going to be any good. You don't even need to convince yourself that it's worth making. Just make the version that you can make right now. Let it be awkward, smaller than you imagined. Let it be obvious. Let the embarrassing little things show. You can fix them later, or you can make another one. And if you make something bad, try to turn that into a story about yourself. Don't look at your first bad attempt and think, I guess I'm not a writer. You're a writer who wrote something bad. Those are very different sentences. And honestly, I think I'd rather be the second person. Because the second person has somewhere to go. The first person is just standing there, protecting an idea of themselves. So yeah, you're allowed to make something bad. Actually, you probably need to. Because there's a version of your life where you never make anything embarrassing. You never show anyone your weird idea. You never publish the rough video or play the terrible song. And from the outside, that life might look pretty safe, but you'll also never get the information that comes from trying. You'll never know what you're good at. You'll never know what you care about enough to keep doing, and you'll never know what gets better if you give it another year. You'll never get to look back at something you made a few years ago and think, wow, I'm really glad I was bad at that. So go make the bad thing, not because bad is secretly good, just because it's probably the price of finding out what comes next. And if you're embarrassed by it, honestly, that's okay. It means you've made something real enough to have an opinion about. That's more than having a perfect idea. Anyway, thanks for listening. Subscribe.